Hi, this is Craig Morley. This is an overview of a CE class that we had developed. Please be advised that as a sitting member of the Appraisal Standards Board with the Appraisal Foundation, any references made to appraisal standards are not the position of the Appraisal Foundation or the Appraisal Standards Board. They simply represent my own understanding and should not be taken as an official position. This course was developed to provide a brief overview of appraisal modernization, along with a discussion of some of the changes that will be coming in report writing, market condition reporting, an overview of some of the tools that are available to help appraisers support some of their opinions and conclusions. Appraisal modernization began in 2011 when the government-sponsored enterprises, including Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, realized they had millions of appraisals, but with no practical way to be able to analyze the appraisals as they were generally submitted as a PDF file. With the introduction of the data standardization, it allowed the users of these appraisals to more effectively analyze the appraisals which they had. An appraisal is essentially a risk analysis tool used by a lender. A lender, in analyzing the risk of a loan, usually has three major elements. The first being the creditworthiness of the borrower, which is expressed in the credit score of that borrower. The second is the ability to repay. That's usually expressed in the debt-to-income ratio. And finally, is the collateral that will be securitizing that loan in the event that the borrower is unable to make the payment. That is usually expressed in the appraisal. As lenders analyze the risk associated with each loan, loans where there is a large down payment and the borrower has good credit histories and income, the risk associated with the collateral securitizing that loan is fairly low. And so the analysis of the collateral becomes less significant than it would be where there's a small down payment and credit scores fall on the lower end of the range. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac have developed a staged system in determining when an appraisal is needed and what kind of valuation service is required. The first is referred to as a waiver, known by Fannie Mae as value acceptance. Essentially, this is where the collateral risk is very low and they have good information on the property. An appraisal waiver may be granted where no appraisal is required. The second is where the credit history and ability to repay is good, but they don't have much information on the property that will collateralize the loan, where a third-party data collector will be sent out to collect that information, whereupon some kind of valuation tool, some AVM, is used, and that becomes the basis for securitizing the loan, again, where no appraisal is required. The third is a hybrid appraisal. The hybrid appraisal is where the third-party data collector who collected that information has the information then sent to a qualified certified appraiser to perform an appraisal based on the information collected by the data collector. This is referred to as a hybrid appraisal. The fourth is a desktop appraisal. This is where an appraiser uses the best available information either from a prior appraisal performed by the appraiser, from public record data, MLS data, or other sources where the information is deemed to be reliable. A desktop appraisal can then be performed by the appraiser. The fifth system is the traditional appraisal, where the appraiser is engaged to both inspect the property, collect the information, and perform the appraisal as has traditionally been done in the past. Appraisal modernization is essentially trying to leverage the technology's data and analytics to enhance the management of collateral risk, making the process more efficient for lenders, borrowers, appraisers, and secondary market investors. Valuation modernization helps lenders, appraisers, and risk investors manage collateral more effectively while also benefiting the consumers by greater appraisal accuracy, lower costs, and increased speed. The process of modernization is ongoing and will continue over the next several years as the reporting systems are updated, data standards are updated. The following on this slide reflects the items that were previously discussed on the value acceptance plus the property data, hybrid, desktop, and traditional appraisals. The following definitions are provided by Fannie Mae and gives a framework to understand how and when these are to be used. The property data collection consists of a full interior and exterior inspection of the property. The data can be performed by a trained and vetted third party. Fannie Mae has established property data standards and an API to collect the data and images consistently. The process encourages the use of emerging technologies to capture property information, imagery, and floor plans. The GSEs have established standards that must be adopted in order to be used in their hybrid appraisal process. It's here that I would like to point out that there is a vast difference between the hybrid and desktop appraisals required by the GSEs and those who are being completed through many appraisal management companies where the intended use is for a home equity loan or something along that line, and it's being performed by a lender or an end user where the appraisal is not being, or where the loan is not being sold in a secondary market. The scope of work and intended use is significantly different, and it should be clear in the minds of the appraiser and the users of those appraisals that that is a significant difference. Often home equity loans fall below the de minimis lending requirements so that a lender does not need an appraisal. In those cases, they will oftentimes get a desktop appraisal to meet the compliance requirements, but that have a different scope of work than was traditionally found by the GSEs. As part of this appraisal modernization, with updating of the standards, there will be a change in the Uniform Residential Appraisal Report. That process is underway. The data standards have been completed by the GSEs and are now in the hands of the software developers to develop a way to be able to apply these new standards. In the past, appraisers would have a form, various different forms based on the property type. With the modernization system that will be put into play, the report there will be a single report that will have different information based on the physical characteristics of the property. For example, if a property is identified as a single family home, the information required to be provided by the appraiser will be different than if it's an income producing property such as a 2 to 4 family. The information for a condominium unit will be different than for a manufactured home, and the data that will be provided will be based upon the identification of the property type. Other portions of the report will require different information based on utilities. If a property is connected to public sewer and water, the information will be provided by the appraiser. However, if they indicate that it's a private sewer or private septic tank or private well, additional information will be required as part of the data being provided. There will be expanded information for highest and best use and other elements that will allow the report to be more seamless and less constricted by the data or the size of the input section as is currently found on the existing form. For example, if I need to provide more information on a neighborhood, the appraiser would be able to input the information necessary without the constraints that currently exist on the form. One of the areas of concern that have been expressed by the users of appraisals is having adequate support for the various market characteristics associated with the property. The overview, as defined by Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, is that the sales comparison approach to value of comparable sales, sales contracts, and listings of property that are most comparable to the subject. The appraiser's analysis of the property must take into consideration all factors that have an effect on value. The appraiser must analyze all closed sales, contracts, and offerings or listings of properties that are most comparable to the subject property in order to identify any significant differences or elements of a comparison that could affect their opinion of value. This is particularly important in changing, increasing, or declining markets. Analyzing closed sales, contracts, and offerings or listings is an important analysis in any market and will result in more accurate reporting on market condition, including trends that include prices for contract sales, asking prices for offerings or listings as they have changed. The neighborhood section of the report is where the market conditions are initially identified as either being stable, increasing, or declining. In the past, there have been problems where appraisers have not accurately reflected the changing market conditions, or there has been poorly supported adjustments or no adjustments made when in fact there are changing market conditions. The GSEs have provided some guidance on data verification and sources of comparable data. Very often appraisers are relying on MLS sources as well as third-party data sources or public record sources. The first section of the appraisal verification is to identify the source from where it was obtained, and the second is the data source, and it must be reliable sources when where the example of verification sources include but are not limited to the buyer, seller, listing agent, selling agent, closing documents, and in certain situations. Regardless of the source used, there must be sufficient data to understand the condition of sales, existence of financing condition, physical characteristics of the property, and whether or not the transaction was arm's length. It is significant to note that example of some of the data sources should be specific and refrain from using things such as tax records, agent, builder, and so forth. Another step in the Fannie Mae effort to modernize was to adopt a standardized way of determining what constitutes living area and how to consistently measure the physical characteristics of a property. On April 1st, 2022, Fannie Mae adopted the American National Standard Institute measurement standard, often referred to as ANSI. This allows appraisers to consistently determine the living area versus non-living areas associated with a property, and how to appropriately report those have been provided by questions and answers that are provided by Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. At this point, Fannie Mae is the only one who has adopted the ANSI as their mandatory standard. Most of the other market participants, such as FHA, VA, and Freddie Mac, will allow the use of the ANSI standard, but it's not mandatory. I think most people have heard of the ANSI standard and believe that they are measuring to that standard. However, in practice, there are a few things that oftentimes are overlooked. The ANSI measurement standard is based on measuring to the nearest inch or tenth of a foot from the outside wall of the structure for the above grade main living space. Staircases are included in the square footage from the floor in which they descend. Any space that is partially or completed or below grade is reported as a basement space. All finishes in living area must have a ceiling height of at least 7 feet. In a sloping room with ceilings must be at least 50% of the square footage must have a ceiling height of 7 feet and cannot include spaces below 5 feet. There are a number of questions and answers that are available from Fannie Mae on their website that provide some questions and answers, but understanding the standard becomes essential for doing and analyzing properties that fit within this measurement standard. FHA had recently announced the retirement of the 1004 MC market condition report that was required. FHA has specific requirements for market condition reporting. The appraiser must provide an objective analysis of the local real estate market, including the trends and conditions that may affect the value of the property being appraised. The appraisal report must include the following. 1. Market analysis. The appraiser must provide detailed analysis of the local real estate market, include recent sales trends, current inventory, market conditions that may affect the property's value. That's the broader market analysis. As we drill down, we go to the neighborhood analysis. The appraiser must describe the neighborhood in which the property is located, including the types of properties in the area and any changes or trends that may affect the values of the property in that neighborhood. Drilling down a little further, we do a property analysis. The appraiser must provide detailed analysis of the property being appraised, including its physical characteristics, condition, and any improvements or renovations that have been made. In my experience, this is an area where oftentimes appraisals seem to fall short. They will report that some kind of remodeling or improvement has taken place, but fail to provide the details on what that analysis was or what those improvements were. This is an area where I believe appraisal reports could contain significantly more information than is oftentimes found. And then the final portion is the appraiser must provide an opinion of the property's value based on the market and property analysis. Essentially, FHA is trying to make sure that the appraisals are accurate, objective, and based on current market conditions. FHA has specific requirements as part of the property's observation by the appraiser. The appraiser must make an attic inspection. However, the language recently changed where it had previously said at a minimum make a head and shoulders observation. That language has been taken out. Some appraisers have taken that to mean that that is no longer required. As I understand it, the reason the language was changed because appraisers who had adequate, easy access into attic spaces were only making a head and shoulders inspection rather than making a complete inspection when those inspections were possible to be done. So the current update as of April of 2023 is the appraiser must visually observe the interior of the attic space to the extent that the areas are safely accessible. That's suggesting that if you can get into the attic space that you should do so and look around. The appraiser is not required to disturb insulation or move items that obstruct access. I think that generally is implied that you are not having to do a balancing act across ceiling joists. That would generally be considered unsafe inspection. If the observation reveals evidence of deficient conditions such as water-stained ceilings, insufficient ventilation, smell of mold, the appraiser must report this condition and render the appraisal subject to an inspection or subject to repairs in compliance with the repair inspection requirements. The appraiser must report when the attic space is not accessible. The appraiser must complete the appraisal subject to inspection by qualified third parties only if the observation of inaccessible areas is necessary to determine compliance with the minimum property requirements. Similar requirements are required for crawl spaces. The language is very similar, and the same requirement applies that the appraisal must be completed subject to an inspection by a qualified third party only if the observation of the inaccessible area is necessary to determine compliance with the MPR and MPS. This provides the specific information from the HUD 4000.1 handbook that indicates for market condition and changing markets and the appraiser's requirements. So the definition is increasing market refers to any neighborhood, market area, or region that demonstrates an increase in prices or improvements in other market conditions evidenced by decreasing of existing inventory and reduced marketing times. Declining markets refer to any neighborhood, market area, or region that demonstrates a decline in prices or a deterioration in market conditions as evidenced by an oversupply of inventory and existing marketing times. So in a traditional stable market, the recording requirements are somewhat different than in a changing market. So in a standard market, the analysis and valuation of properties to be used as collateral for FHA insured financing must consider and properly address market changes in the subject market. The appraiser must determine if the market trends are increasing, stable, or declining. The appraiser must analyze the broad market first, the neighborhood analysis, then analyze the specific market, direct sales comparison, and then relate how the subject relates in these market areas. This is oftentimes the case where an entry-level home may have different trends than for high-end homes, or you may have a bimodal market where the trends don't always follow the same increase or decrease. So an appraiser must provide support for the conclusions, including housing trends, overall market conditions in the neighborhood section of the report. So the appraisal requirement is that in changing markets with increasing or declining market trends, the appraiser must include an absorption rate analysis, at least 2 comparable sales within 90 days prior to the effective date of the appraisal, and a minimum of 2 active listings or pending sales on the sales comparison grid. If that data does not exist, it requires a more significant analysis to explain why that information was not provided. There are a variety of tools available to assist appraisers in making a determination of the general market trends. One of the useful tools that I've found is produced by FHFA, the Federal Housing Finance Agency, that keeps track of general trends for every metro area in the United States. And in looking at this, it will provide you with a trend over a long period of time. In this case, it will show the state trend along with the market trend for a metro area. This would generally be more reflective of the broader market and may not specifically apply to an individual market, but is a tool that is useful in providing general direction of market trends. The only problem with this data is it tends to be a little bit dated. It tends to run 3, 4, 5 months behind in terms of being able to get the most current information. But it provides general directions on where the market's going. Most MLS systems have built into their system a general analysis that will show trends. This is a sample of information that was pulled from a local MLS that provides the change in the median list price, where properties that are more similar to the property being appraised can be analyzed and can provide the general support for your opinions on marketing time, general trends, inventories, and related information. And oftentimes, trend line analysis can be provided in association with this. It generally makes sense to put these trends over an 18 to 2 year period, 18-month to 2 year period of time, in order to filter out any seasonal changes that may take place within a local market. Many of the software applications have tools built in where MLS data can be downloaded and analyzed. In this case, this is from Total software, where a set of data is downloaded from the MLS. It provides a summary of that data, and then we'll put a trend line, which in this case shows one standard deviation from the mean, and we'll plot where the comparable sales fit within the trend line. That can be useful in analyzing the data being used in the appraisal. Another tool that often goes unused is simply using Excel. In this case, data is downloaded from the multiple listing service. In this case, I like to analyze the sales price per square foot rather than the total sales price and trend that over a time period. You have the ability to do straight line analysis or curvilineal analysis in polynomial, a second degree order polynomial, and it will fit these trend lines in so that it will help you to better understand where the market prices are going. This is simply used from a MLS export using Excel to help establish the trend. There are a wide range of tools that are available to help appraisers complete this market analysis required. A summary of these are outlined here. Data Master, Spark, Titan Analytics is built right into Total Analysis. GandySoft is a stepwise paired sales analysis that allows you to download MLS data and analyze on that basis. Appraisal Genie has a variety of trend analysis that can be built in. The Solomon Adjustment Calculator is a system that takes depreciated costs and provides some framework or guidelines on how to look at the contribution value of various elements associated with property. The Market Machine is a software application developed by Josh Wallet. Obviously, Excel that we had shown. A couple of tools that oftentimes go unused is Zillow RPR. The RPR is the Realtor Property Resource. Many appraisers who join MLS systems become members of the National Association of Realtors, which gives you access to a free tool which will allow you to generate property reports that will also provide market trends as well as information such as schools, businesses, and so forth within the proximity of the property that's being appraised. Within the body of the neighborhood analysis within the existing 1004 form is the grid boxes that provide a brief overview with the area for some comment and analysis. The tables provided below were generated through using Spark as a tool that is available in this market area, and will provide with general market characteristics by the MLS data, and can provide some indications of the prices, the general trends, the highs and the lows. Generally speaking, providing more specific analysis is required somewhere within the body of the report. In this case, we've discussed the changes where market conditions had seen rapid increases through 2021 into about the second quarter of 2022. You'll all recall that mortgage interest rates nearly doubled within a short period of time. That resulted in declining sales activity and ultimately in declining sales prices in many markets. Describing that condition helps the user of the appraisal to better understand the dynamics of the local market. One of the complaints that have often been expressed as part of the modernization is that the GSEs found that appraisers were using routine adjustments without real support for making those adjustments. I remember years ago being at an FHA course where the instructors from FHA had indicated that they expected to see square footage adjustments made at $30 to $35 per square foot. And those adjustments seem to have persisted for years, regardless of the market conditions. Similarly, we would see adjustments being applied for age at typically $500 to $1,000 per square foot or per year, with no real support as to if that actually reflects what the market's doing. So the concept is that the appraiser needs to provide support for how these adjustments are being developed. This is just an illustration that is used to show how square footage adjustments were supported by taking an average price per square foot and calculating the variable price based on cost, which in this case is estimated to be 35% of the total sales price per square foot. Now, this has baked into it the fact that you've got fixed costs associated with your lot. You've got some fixed costs associated with things like garages that are adjusted elsewhere, and other issues associated with quality, condition, and so forth. At the end of the day, the adjustment needs to be supported, not necessarily proved. But providing something more than just the restatement of where the number, but rather providing the support for that number, is something that most users of appraisal services expect to see. So we'd like to discuss some of the ways to avoid some of the typical problems that are being observed in appraisals being produced. Number one, be specific in describing the property, the neighborhood, and other portions of the within the report. Don't use vague words or prohibited words. Number two, provide detail in the building description regarding the quality, condition, updating, remodeling. We discussed earlier that providing specifics about the updating, remodeling, including cost if that kind of information is available, can help paint a more complete picture as to the quality and condition of the improvements. It's useful to describe the criteria in making comp selection. Many people who complain that the appraiser has not been objective and independent believe that the appraiser has been arbitrary in the selection of the comparable sales based on something other than market. Providing specific information can help avoid some of those claims. Specific, meaningful reconciliations for both the data used and the approaches to value having been developed is essential. Reconciliation is part of the appraisal process, and providing specific information such as the net and gross adjustments, which sales seem to be most similar to the property and provided the most reliable indication of value, can be helpful in guiding the user of the appraisal to understand how your opinion was developed. Here's a few illustrations of what some of these reconciliations might look like. This is by no means best practice, but it is a little more specific than we oftentimes find in an appraisal report. So in the sales analysis, I might describe the search criteria that I used. If I used a radius search, I might tell the reader of the appraisal that I search sales within a certain radius, if that's appropriate, for properties that were within a square footage range, having been built within a reasonable time period, and discuss how many data sets were available. There were 40 listings and sales. We filtered the sales data to within the past 100 days and selected the following comparable the following sales as being comparable for the following reasons. By providing that specific information, it's likely to result in having less complaints about arbitrary comparable sales selection. In the general reconciliation, the final opinion is based on the comparable sales that are most similar to the subject. This first part might be kind of a general analysis of what you've done. My analysis shows a wide range of values for sales that have occurred in the area. I'm trying to reconcile the differences between the subject and the comparable sales. It looks like the specifics, the more specific you can be in discussing the data that you observed and how you arrived at a general or at a final opinion of value, is useful in guiding the reader of the appraisal to understand your thought process. I've also found there's some pretty handy little voice-to-text tools that you can use that will help you provide this more detailed analysis without having to type it all out, which saves a little time and effort. You can use tools that will help you to provide summary tables. For example, in this case, we are using some tools that show the unadjusted and adjusted high, low, average, and median, and helps us to better understand if our analysis is closing the gap from the high to low range, which in this case, there's still, as indicated in the reconciliation, a wide range, but the range has dropped by almost 60%, suggesting that the analysis is more reflective or is providing a more supported indication of value. A table then can be provided to show the net and gross adjustments that could then be used as part of your reconciliation that says, well, I think that comparable one is a reliable sale. It's within close proximity with no net adjustment and no very small gross adjustment. That might be providing a reliable indication of value for the property. And it turns out that that indicated value is near the median indicated value of the comparable sales. Specific information is the point of this, to make sure that we're explaining and providing meaningful support for our final opinion of value. The fifth exposure draft for the Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice has been adopted and will go into effect in January of 2024. If you haven't had an opportunity to review that exposure draft, then you may want to do that. There are several inclusions, things that have been added, a non-discrimination section within the ethics rule, as well as some changes in definitions and other items that you will want to be aware of so that you can find yourself in compliance with those obligations that exist as an appraiser. I don't think there's very many appraisers who are active in the market who haven't been aware of claims of appraisal bias, particularly on the basis of race or other protected classes. The question is, how do I avoid these complaints? There's a few things that, as you begin to look at some of the information that will be coming forth from the Appraisal Foundation, that will help understand the obligations that you have. But this just represents a simple list of things that you can do in your business practice that will help avoid some of these problems. Number one is be respectful and avoid controversial conversations. We're aware of a situation where an appraiser's in the home of a gay couple and is explaining his religious views on gay marriage. Well, when the appraisal comes in lower than the property owners were hoping for, it results in a complaint that they believe the appraiser was biased on the basis of sexual orientation. Well, that's a conversation that does not need to take place in a home for any reason. Property owners oftentimes will want to provide information about their property. Accept the information, be gracious about it, and then within the body of the report, if that information was provided, explain that the property owner provided this information. I either used it or I didn't use it. If I didn't use it, explain why. It may well be that the information was based on a price per square foot, where the physical characteristics were just not that similar to the property. If that's the case, explain it. It will defray the possibility of someone believing that you were arbitrary in the way that the information was considered or used. Don't discuss value or analysis of the property with the owner. Oftentimes we hear situations where people will discuss the impact of various property components like view or quality or amenities. That analysis should not be discussed with the property owner. That's confidential information that is only supposed to be communicated with the client and those intended users as identified by the client. Ask for property information. Make sure that you've got a complete picture of the property and its characteristics. Answer calls and emails when people call. Oftentimes, borrowers and sellers don't understand the appraiser's obligation of confidentiality, what they can discuss and what they can't. We found that as someone calls up, they're unhappy usually with the results, and they want to talk about it. Answer the phone. Explain to them, I would love to discuss this with you, but I have a confidential obligation with my client not to do so. If you want to reach out to your lender and have them give me permission to discuss this, then I'd be happy to do that. Most lenders will not do that, and it defers the frustration from you as the appraiser to the lender, and it is a way to help avoid the possibility of a complaint against you. Don't use prohibited words in the report. We've seen a little bit of the complaints about some of the long lists of prohibited words that are being put out on social media. Be aware of what those words are and try to understand why they're prohibited. The reality is that we oftentimes use words that are code words or can be interpreted as code words, and we want to avoid those. Provide specific, meaningful analysis and avoid canned comments. I can't tell you how many appraisals I've seen where canned comments are baked into the report that are in conflict with other portions of the appraisal. Make sure that the comments are specific to the property and the assignment, and avoid generic comments that have no real meaningful analysis in the appraisal. And finally, support your adjustments. Again, the idea of supporting the adjustments is explaining the logic that was used to develop and make those adjustments. Sometimes those are difficult to do. It doesn't need this significant statistical analysis, but it needs some kind of analysis to support how those adjustments are being developed. Finally, practical applications of real estate appraisal, PREA, looks like it will be rolled out later this year. The Appraisal Institute is likely to be the first to roll out a system. If you have an interest in trying to get your practical experience through that system, reach out. There are likely to be grants available, and the cost could be defrayed from using some of these resources that might otherwise be available. This concludes the summary of the course that was presented on the GSE updates. Feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions. I can be reached at valuepro@gmail.com. No E in value, so it's VALUPRO@gmail.com. Feel free to leave messages, notes, comments, interested in seeing if this information is of use, and appreciate your watching the video. Thank you.